Welcome to the latest episode of Five on the Floor on the Five Reasons Sports Network. Thanks for joining us on your favorite podcast app on Apple Podcasts, on Android, Spotify, or the Five Reasons YouTube channel. Also, make sure you subscribe to Off the Floor. That's our Discord server, $2.99 per month. You can bypass the Apple upcharge. See how nice we are to you. We didn't even put tariffs on it. Check it out. It's Off the Floor. Link in the description. Bypass the Apple upcharge. Get access to the most heat anywhere, the most heat information, conversation, consternation, and celebration. It's all there on Off the Floor. Also, check out the great sponsors of the Five Reasons Sports Network, includes Prize Picks. Use code 5 FIVE, put down your $5, get $50 to play right away. This is the official fantasy partner of the Five Reasons Sports Network. Play up to 6 players together across the sports spectrum, and of course, you can play the Heat. So check it out. Use the code FIVE at prizepicks.com.
Mercy, luxurious. Heat Nation. Yeah. Mercy and Lago. Down to Biscayne. Yeah. Five on the floor. Ride for my dogs. Where here's the thing. You can check the score. Hustle hard, couple scars. Wearing bubble frogs. Down to Biscayne. Kept the flow playing. Got it all band. Y'all seen the block. Stop with one hand. And Pat we trust, it's power have the guts. We're here to bring the heat, y'all can hang it up.
Welcome to Five on the Floor, a daily insider show on the Miami Heat and the NBA, featuring Ethan Skolnick, Greg Sylvander, Alex Toledo, Brady Hawk, and others from the Five Reasons Sports Network. Also, make sure to subscribe to Off the Floor for the most heat anywhere.
Welcome back to Five on the Floor. Here's today's floor plan. I'm Ethan Skolnick. You can follow me at Ethan J. Skolnick and at Five Reasons Sports. I got Alex Toledo. You can follow him at Tropical Blanket. Make sure to check out post-game episode of the Heat's latest loss. They've now lost 2 in a row after winning 6 straight, after losing 10 in a row. Been competitive in both games, this one without Tyler Hero, but lost to Milwaukee at home in overtime. So check out that episode, with Gio and Greg. It's on the podcast feed. Also, congratulations to Micky Arison, elected to the Basketball Hall of Fame. There are other owners in the Hall of Fame. I know people were confused about this yesterday, but Mickey's not the first owner to make it. I'm going to do a full episode on this, likely with Greg here over the next couple of days. We just didn't have time to line it up. But all I'll say to those on Twitter is this. You're here because of what the Arisons and Pat Riley put together in 1995. Like that's the simplest way to put it. You can be critical of what's gone on in recent years or not being opportunistic enough or how money has been allocated or anything like that. Totally fair. I mean, we do that here as well. But to not acknowledge why the owner of the team that put this into motion when this was a nothing organization. I'm old enough to know. I was, I guess, 22 when he became a managing general partner. And I mean, the Heat were, they had occasional first round picks of really interesting college players. That's pretty much what they were until, the Arisons took control and then hired Pat Riley away from New York, gave up the pick to do it. And then Pat set everything that you kind of know about, that you kind of take for granted as fans in motion at that point, because none of this existed before. With that being said, do they need to be better going forward so that we're not talking about play-ins every year? Yes. I think both those things can be true. So we'll do a full episode on that. But Alex, I want to get into this year with you and with the players that we know that they have. This is not one of our transaction episodes or anything like that. But the players we know that we have or could be coming back from injury, how do they surprise somebody the rest of the way? Because we've seen them capable of really poor play and we've seen them capable of really quality play. And the last couple of games have been closer to quality than poor, I think, based on the circumstances of those two games, one back-to-back, another one without Tyler. What would you lean into right now? What are they good at as a current team?
Well, that's the thing. That's actually a tough question because there's not very many things. They have a lot of, I would say, good players individually, but as a team, as a whole, honestly, I think it's stuff that we've been talking about for years, but it's probably even more important now. The margin for error and the way that they can shrink it by, like with the way that the roster is built, playing as close to mistake-free basketball as you can. And that starts for them, in my opinion, on the defensive end. As we've said for years, they're better, when they've got that defensive foundation first and they kind of play off of that first and then the offense kind of comes around. And I think, that's, like I said, even more so for this team. with the way that their roster is built. It just feels like they have like certain things they can get to, right? Like we all know, Bam is at his best when he's kind of somewhere there in that mid post area. We know that he can be used as a handoff guy with Duncan or with Tyler in different spots on the floor. Like we know what the general, what the plays are going to look like for some of these guys. But how can they find a balance of like how do we optimize this team, right? And I think that's where the question is. It's like how much of the Duncan stuff do you run? How much of the hero stuff do you run? How much of the Bam stuff do you run? And then when Wiggins is back, because he's been, he's averaged 20 for them. He's been a big part of that offense. I still think it's been one of these things where like we haven't really seen it that much. And it's so funny that we're saying that again, except the circumstances are so different this time around. But it's in all reality, like Wiggins has missed half of the games since he's been here. And then he's played pretty good in most of the games he has played. So it's been such a weird issue here that they have, since Wiggins was somebody that played so much. I just feel like they know what they can get to with certain guys. At this point, it's about tweaking it and figuring out who gets the bigger piece of the pie, right? Like we've even seen like in games like last night where you've got Hero out, you've got Wiggins out, Jovic, of course. You have guys like Alec Burks scoring 24. You have Davion, who finished with 20 something. He just somebody who can actually get to the paint, and create for himself. Not as a primary option, but he's been much better than advertised on offense as well. Like they've got a lot of guys they can go to, but I think that they've sort of come around to figure out the rotational balance, and that's because of certain guys being out. But now it's all about how much of it does Wiggins get? How much of it does Bam get? How much of it does Hero get? Davion to a lesser extent. Just they figured out the rotation. Where do you go from here?
Well, I think when you look at good teams, which I don't think they are yet, and I think they would acknowledge that. When you look at good teams that can seriously threaten, they know what their thing is. They know at the end of close games where they can go to stabilize a game, to make a play. I don't think this team is there. I don't think they'll get there this year. I think it was Jimmy comes back with 6 minutes left and gets to the line. That was the thing. That became not an option, obviously, as this season has gone on, and there's become a lot more Tyler late in games, hoping he makes the right decisions, hoping that they keep Bam re-engaged, hoping that Wiggins is on the floor. I think for all of these reasons, because it's been so much hope, and we're looking at 3 games left in the year. 4 games left. How many games are 3? 4 games left in the year. Philadelphia at home, Chicago, New Orleans on the road, Washington home. And we don't even know that they're going to have to get to some of their things, because if we look at the last couple of games of the season, that game against Washington at home, they may not end up playing anybody, because if they're stuck at 9 or 10 or whichever seed, or if I don't think they would have secured 8 by then, but if they're stuck at 9 and 10, they might just sit where they're at. But I don't think they have a time to get to a game then. I think that there are certain lineups that they have that they can go to if they want more defense. For instance, I think Spoelstra has figured out there are some groups that can get more defense. I think if Jovic was healthy, we'd have a better idea of how they could unlock the offense in some situations, because they did count on him to do that. And of course, if Duncan was playing at a higher level or been healthier of late. But I don't think they're going to get to it. I think what this is just going to be about is I think what we want to see the rest of the year from this team is honestly effort and resilience from these guys. And I know that sounds kind of I don't know, cheesy in the fact that we're not talking X's and O's in that regard. But I think what you're evaluating as you have an underdog team that doesn't really have an identity, doesn't really have a game, what you're evaluating is, do you have guys who'll just go harder than the guys on the other team to maximize whatever it is they have to give you an opportunity? And that's
the blueprint right now. That's what this team is all about.
And they weren't though. For a while. Maybe it was the Jimmy hangover, everything else that was going on with that. I really think Mitchell has changed that equilibrium in a lot of games where they seem to be feeding off his effort in some of these games. Like, you have to play at his speed unless you're slow-mo, in which case you know how to play hard while still playing slow. But Mitchell has been one who I think has really changed the temperature in a lot of these games. And that's what I want to see for more of them. I want to see growth. I want to see Tyler make plays down the stretch of games. I want to see Bam not disappear. I want to see if Wiggins comes back, if again, he can have these scoring games that lead to wins against good teams. I think that's what I'm curious about also with him. And then I think when you look at Ware, I just want to see him earn Spo's trust enough to stay on the floor. And we saw the other night he didn't. And I don't know if that's going to happen by the end of the year, but at least you'd like to see if it can happen in a playoff situation.
Yeah, no doubt. I think you brought up a lot of good points there. Especially when it comes to like the personnel stuff. I mentioned how they've kind of figured out some things, and it's basically just not really playing Terry and Jaime. That's kind of what it comes down to as of late. But then when you look at, you mentioned the defensive lineups, which of course I'm a fan of for like certain, like possession by possession basis, like last play of the game, like what they tried to do against Ja, which, as a whole, that really.
You at mute.
But honestly, like what they tried to do down the stretch of the fourth quarter last night and overtime, where they played like they kept playing Pella, who I've been a fan of, right? Like I have wanted to see more of an, been encouraged by what he was doing as a starter. Last night was not really the night to play him so many minutes when you were starved for offense, missing all those guys. And I thought they took too long to bring Duncan back in the game. I thought they really could have used them down the stretch. I understand Burks was doing his thing too, and maybe they didn't want to have both of them in. But like the Bucks without Lillard,
Yeah,
they could have. I feel like they need to lean into these things. So it's about, in my opinion, like picking the right time to do it. And of course, I'm always going to defer to Spo, right? I get that he was trying to lean into just having the one shooter out there and then all defense. And, that's a concept that I'm typically a fan of. But there's just times where I feel like, he leaned into it for too long and they really needed the offense, and they just kind of, not that Duncan would have fixed everything, but would have given you a better shot on that side of the floor. So I'm just using that as an example to say, like, figuring out not only the balance of what to run for who and how much, but the, when to run certain lineups, right? I feel like since it's such a new roster with so many different tools and obviously with certain guys in and out, like you've got a lot of different ways you can go. And I think, like, I appreciate that Larson was thrown out there for so many reps in the clutch. I appreciate that Ware was thrown out there the other night against the Grizzlies, but and then I guess it's really like almost picking a direction. Is like, do you go all in and always play the young guys, even though it's not always going to give you the best shot at winning a game, or do you just live with it,
right?
So that they get the reps? But like, they left Ware out on an island the other night without any help. That's not even really Heat basketball.
No.
You know what I mean? So I feel like it's about figuring out that balance. Like they're all about helping on defense, and like to leave him on an island that night, then that's not really what they do. Like, he's not Bam,
Right.
So I think it's about
trying
to optimize what they have.
I think it's the balance. We'll get into that in a second because you posed a good question, actually. So I want to hit that on the other side, and we'll address that before we go here. And again, your challenge of trying to upset somebody, there's different levels to this. There's getting out of the play-in itself, which might require you to win 2 games on the road, but against bad teams. Because none of these teams are any good. Chicago, Atlanta, Orlando are not good teams right now, but it doesn't necessarily mean you're better. And that's the thing. So, and then there's the other idea of getting past just that and actually making a dent in the playoffs and winning a couple of games off of Cleveland or Boston. And that's another level that they're going to need to get to be able to do that. But we'll handle that on the other side. Here's our friends from Cousins Moving. And now it's time for Who's on the Move, sponsored by our friends over at Cousins USA Moving and Storage, family owned and operated since 1996. They can service both residential and commercial moves, whether you're going across town, across the state, across country, and even across the globe. They have a 15,000 square foot private warehouse in Lauderhill, Broward County. The number one priority for Cousins Moving is transparency and being honest with their customers. They have a very low turnover, with most of their movers working for them for over 10 years. So find them online at Cousins Moving on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or visit the website at www.cousinsusa.com/5RSN. They've got an exclusive offer through 5RSN. You get 5 free wardrobe boxes with your next move, so there's no need to pack your clothes away in suitcases. Just mention 5 reasons. And now, who's on the move? Let me ask you this question. Is the Heat on the move towards the playoffs? Well, the play-in. And then maybe the playoffs. And then maybe we get a week more, or maybe we get a run into June where Andrew Wiggins becomes playoff Jimmy and playoff Andrew or something like that. But let me ask you this question because you posed it before. So you can't say it's a difficult question because you actually put it in my mind. What is more important to you? Forget the draft pick part of this, okay? Because that gets all murky because then people want you to lose. So we're assuming you want them to win once they go to a certain point. I don't want to put words in your mouth or thoughts in your head, but let's just assume that just for the sake of control group here. So the idea is to try to be competitive or show something during this period of time. Is it more important to you that, say, Duncan Robinson, who you know everything about at this point, or Alec Burks, who probably won't be with you beyond this year, someone along those lines? Okay, might be, might not be, whatever. Is in situations to help tilt the game because he may be playing better at that stage or has more experience in that game? Or is it more important for you for Ware, for Larson, I mean, Davion's getting these reps as it is, okay, and he's not an old guy either. But is it more important for you for them to get their turn now? Because if, in other words, if you're not winning the championship anyway, some are going to say just play the young guys even up until the very end of this, even if it costs you a playoff game. Do you agree with that?
I think you play the young guys. I think you play the young guys for sure. But I again, like, I don't think that means you got to put them in situations where they're not going to be at their best. So it's like if you're really, because the motto is not the motto, the what you're trying to do is win, right? So if that is the ultimate thing,
Yeah.
right? And I'm not saying, I don't believe obviously that they have a chance at a run or anything like that, but if it's all about trying to get the win, then development isn't necessarily the priority. But that doesn't mean I don't play the young guys. I just think it's kind
Right.
of like what you're seeing right now with Spo. Honestly, I think Spo is kind of showing you kind of the in-between route where, like, yeah, these guys are featured. They're playing, like Larson and Ware are both starting, but
Right.
they like Ware is not always going to play that many minutes. He's going to have his minutes as a starter, and those are his minutes next to Bam. And like last night, he finished with whatever it was, like 15 minutes played. And Larson finished with a whole lot more. But it's not always going to be the case. And I know Larson has been playing a lot more recently, but that wasn't the case, of course, when Wiggins was starting. And he, of course, was behind Jaquez for a while there. And I don't, that's not the case anymore. But my point is, like, they're in kind of these controlled roles right now while still being featured. And I think that's kind of the happy medium, right? That Spo is kind of trying to toe the line and just be like, hey, we're going to feature these guys. But, at the end of the day, we're going to play the guys who we think are going to give us the best shot at winning. And that's why I think, like, you saw Alec Burks and Kyle Anderson getting so many minutes, Davion, right? Like the guys who are playing well for you that he knows what they're going to give you. Like those are the guys he's going to lean on if they're the ones playing well. Like Larson last night, again, like he wasn't really doing that with Pella last night. Like Larson didn't play well and he just continued to play him, so
And
as
I
far as
think we may see that. I think we may see that in a couple of these games down the stretch, and then if this thing flips to a playoff series, it's going to be managed differently. And I think this is a balance they're trying to strike because nobody is Dwayne on this roster, so please don't anybody throw that at me. But if you look at Dwayne's rookie year, okay, which was a transitional year, they didn't know that they were going to get Shaq, and obviously that team made a run to the playoffs that most were not expecting. They started 0-7. But in the critical game, and a lot of people never got over this, in the critical game, Stan Van Gundy took out Dwayne Wade, who had 2 game winners in the postseason already, on the last possession, and put in Ray for Alston because he needed a 3. And Dwayne was not on the court at the end of that 6-game series loss to Indiana. They lost at home. That's the series that he dunked on Jermaine O'Neal, for those who don't remember. So he had already emerged. He hit a couple game winners against I guess it was the Hornets at the time. And Stan still made that decision. And I feel like that's where we're at. Like, not Dwayne, obviously, but this idea that I think Spo leans into trying to play the young guys as much as he can to get them experience. But if he doesn't trust them and he trusts somebody else in a different situation, this is going to tilt more towards the winning side here as they go forward. And the draft pick side is not something they're considering at all in that regard. It's just, is it more important to have a guy learn in this situation who may be with us in the future, or is it more important for us to actually get through the situation? And I think as we tilt towards the playoffs, it's more about take the guy who's going to get us through the situation. So I think you're right, but I think he didn't do that last night. So that's why it's an interesting
he
time.
trusts Pella though. I think he played Pella so much because he trusts him so much, where it's like, oh, this guy's gonna help me win.
make the right plays. Exactly. But I think the highest trust we've seen is no longer there. So it's like, okay, if you're at least going to get to see one of them here down the stretch. All right, on the next part of this, I believe we will have this for you. Our friend Nelson Solomon from c-armandstaffing.com. They bring X-ray equipment to you. They've been sponsors all year round. He's also a huge Heat fan, and we had a little problem with connection, so I apologize for that. But his perspective on the end of this season, and we recorded this a couple of days ago, is very similar to some of you guys. They don't want you guys. Some of you guys don't want us talking about any of this because you don't want the Heat winning right now. Anyway, my conversation with Nelson coming up next.